Hey everyone, welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm your host Robert Durden, and this episode is going to be short and maybe boring, but I want to break down a bill that I just read. It's extremely long, but it was worth it. It's called the Thrive Act, and it's considered kind of like the first step of the Green New Deal. And Ed Markey and Debbie Dingell of Michigan, they're the ones that are kind of bringing it forward. It came out on Thursday. It's kind of derivative of something that they came out with last year, but it's pretty cool. It's nowhere near enough, but I'd like to break it down for you guys, and it would be really awesome if it were part of the families plan or jobs plan, particularly the jobs plan that Biden has coming out right now. And the way that they framed the Thrive Act is they want to fight climate change, but it's mostly framed around the jobs that it would create. And that, I think, is clever. And I think that's the best way to frame it, because right now, even Biden has to know that we're in a depression. And getting people back to work is clearly one of the biggest priorities, especially if you want some sort of FDR-like legacy. We'll see if he actually does want that. But it's framed correctly. You could theoretically just go in there and be like, listen, screw all the green energy stuff. I know you're in the pockets of big oil, so I won't even bother. But just based on what this does for job creation, it's good. So what does it do? I'm going to go into semi-detail on what it does for climate change and also the jobs it creates. So it's a $10 trillion investment from 2022 to 2032, so $1 trillion a year for all of you mathematicians out there. It creates 15.5 million jobs, and not just any job, full-time, fully benefited, unionized jobs at minimum $15 an hour. And there's also some information in there that it dictates that your pay has to be a certain amount depending on what the average in the industry is, so that's good too. And that's what they really focus on in the bill, is those jobs, what they are, and I'll read to you guys an excerpt here in a second. Where is it? About what those jobs actually are going to be. And then the other thing it does is it really tries to invest in infrastructure and, charging stations and converting our electrical grid and our school buses and, our infrastructure is in terms of buildings in the future to zero emissions. So it doesn't go nearly far enough in that regard, in my opinion. So let's start with that real quick. Here's what it tries to do in terms of, taking the first step towards the Green New Deal. As of 2026, there will be no new constructions allowed in the United States that are not zero emission. So they won't allow any buildings ever to be built in the United States past 2026 that are not net zero emission. That's good. It's not nearly good enough, and the timeline's too long. I mean, we know that we have till about 2030 to make sure that the temperature doesn't rise too much to from pre-industrial levels. If we don't get it done in about a decade, all of this stuff is going to be for naught anyway. So it's a half measure at best. This is a quarter measure at best, but it's good, There's a part, quote, deployment of network of zero-emission vehicle infrastructure by no later than 2031, create zero-emissions public transportation system. So that's good again, but that's a decade from now. That's too late. If that's like your deadline for finally getting like a zero-emission vehicle infrastructure and zero-emissions public transportation system in a decade, it's too late. But again, we'll see. I feel like the millennial generation is going to have to deal with all of these half measures for their entire fucking lives. We're all going to look back at what Barack Obama, Trump, and Biden did, and Bush, and we'll be like, Jesus fucking Christ, we were kids watching these guys wheel and deal and sell our future away, and then they go and conveniently die before they see the entire planet turn to a fucking dystopian future like Mad Max, or they fuck off to Elon Musk's billionaire hotel on Mars or whatever, so they don't have to deal with it anymore. But I digress. It also aspires to 100% clean energy generation with priority given to renewable energy by 2036. So 15 years. Again, that's 6 years past the deadline. So, and if that's, you're aiming low again. I mean, I don't want to badger Markey and Dingle too much because their heads are in the right place. And again, if this is just the first step and we're going to keep pushing Biden progressively as the years go by, then maybe we can get some of this stuff done. But again, this is a half measure. So 100% clean energy generation with priority to renewables. It should say 100% renewable energy by 2036, by the way. But it just says clean energy, which leaves the door open for something like nuclear. Just fucking Christ. This country is bananas. And then by 2036, we will have an entire fleet of e-vehicle school buses. That's the other thing that it said in there, is that we're going to change the entire public school transportation system to e-vehicles or zero emissions. I'll believe that when I see it. That's what Biden said he was going to do on the campaign trail for the USPS, and he ended up giving his government contract not to the e-vehicle company Workhorse, who is based out of Wisconsin. He ended up giving it to the government or a weapons contractor named Oshkosh Defenses, who doesn't even make e-vehicles. They make biodiesel hybrids. So I'll believe it when I actually see it. And of course, this is not Joe Biden's plan. He's going to not allow a lot of this stuff to be in there. Okay, so that's what it does in terms of green energy. Of course, it's going to, create jobs, as we talked about earlier, building charging stations, and hopefully it'll aim for building solar panels and wind turbines, which it does. But the jobs that it creates are really the focal point of this bill. So it creates 15.5 million new jobs. All are union-based jobs, $15 minimum wage. You get childcare support, 14 days paid sick leave a year, 14 days paid vacation a year if they get what they want. Now, of course, all of this is going to get whittled down like crazy if it ever got accepted, which it probably won't. But that's pretty good, because what you end up doing is you spin this to Biden as, don't think of it so much as you're screwing over your oil tycoon buddies and your frack well buddies. Think of it more like it's creating a whole bunch of jobs and accidentally saving the planet, which we need you to do anyway. The lefties will be happy if you take any steps towards the Green New Deal. Frame it that way if you want, Joe. I'm taking a step towards the Green New Deal, and I'm creating 15.5 million jobs in the process. Boom, you just won re-election. That's what I would do if I were, talking to Joe Biden and trying to spin this bill to him to get in, to include some version of it in his family's plan or his jobs plan. But they won't do that. It's been co-sponsored by Ro Khanna and Pramila Jayapal and Ilhan Omar and all of them, but we know how hard they fight on things like this. So methinks it probably won't be included. Even a watered-down version probably won't be included. But I want to give props where props are due. This is the right idea, and it's the best we're going to get under Biden. And, what else can we hope for nowadays other than something like this? So the other thing that I wanted to read to you guys here is where those jobs actually come from. And I want to quote the Common Dreams article here. Quote, "The bill would establish a Thrive board of presidentially appointed representatives from impacted and indigenous communities as well as labor unions to help guide at least $1 trillion in annual investments from fiscal years 2022 to 2032. So they're being more inclusive in the board member that helps divvy up all of the money here, and that's good. And there are some good provisions in here which puts aside a lot of money for people that were, or groups of people that were really, really badly screwed over by COVID, not just in their jobs, but also, places that are traditionally screwed over by pollution or hit exponentially by, natural disasters like wildfires or tornadoes or hurricanes and stuff like that. So in that way, it's structured very well. Here's where I'm going to outline where those jobs all come from, the 15.5 million, or at least what they say here. As Dingle's office outlined, the Thrive Act would upgrade our infrastructure for clean water, affordable public transit, and a reliable electrical grid that creates 5 million jobs, expand access to wind and solar power, electric vehicles, and healthy buildings. That creates 4 million jobs. Now they said expand access. I hate when they say that. Wish they would just say we're transitioning to solar power and renewables. That's it, period. We're going to create those 4 million jobs in those areas. But I digress. We're going to protect our rural and urban spaces, wetlands, prairies, forests, and support family farmers who are embracing regenerative agriculture, creating 4 million jobs. That's good. I like that very much. That's great job creation, and that's a good idea because we're going to need that in the future. And lastly, invest in public institutions and care for children for the elderly. Essential work that is underpaid and largely performed by women of color, and that creates 2 million jobs. So that's important as well. It bolsters basically pre-K and daycare in this country, which we absolutely need to put more money towards. And when you do that, you can also you open up people to take jobs when you make sure that they don't have to worry about their kids being taken care of. So again, that's a slam dunk. It's something Biden has said over and over again. It's easy. So that's one of those things that's like, he might just allow that in there and it might not get whittled down. It's just such a no-brainer. It's so hard to argue against universal pre-K or bolstering our anemic childcare system in this country, because that would free up so many people to get back to work. So it is what it is, guys. I would say that this is something like a C+ effort. If it is, in fact, the first step towards the Green New Deal, and we're just going to kind of piecemeal this thing together over the next 4 to 8 years, if you could guarantee me we got something like this done once a year, I would say it's a good step forward. But like I said, I think it's probably going to die, and a lot of this stuff is not going to ever see the light of day, and if it does, it'll be some sort of quarter measure, and that's not nearly enough. The Earth is cooking right now, and the weather events are getting more and more extreme, and we're already seeing the fallout from our indiscretions over the last century. We have about a decade, so this isn't enough, not nearly enough. And but again, if we can keep pushing Biden to do stuff like this over the period of the next 4 to 8 years, we might have a chance. So we'll just have to see. I don't have much hope in Biden, and I have less hope that anybody that's actually sponsoring this bill is going to do anything to actually force it through. So we'll see, guys. Don't want to be too cynical, but it's a decent idea. I hope they run with it. Keep fighting the good fight out there. I'll talk to you guys later.